Welcome to the Unlocking Wealth podcast. Thanks for joining us. We will motivate and inspire you as we share strategies from successful and wealthy individuals. Here is your host, David Ordonez, an entrepreneur and real estate investor.
Welcome to a new episode of the Unlocking Wealth podcast. As a real estate investor, it is very important that you choose the right partners, and it's essential to your success to select a good lender. We have trusted InstaLend for our lending needs, and they have become our preferred lender for our real estate investments.
InstaLend is your private lending partner, where you can get a loan commitment the same day and close within days. Grow your real estate portfolio with InstaLend. Tell us about your project. We lend on all product types, from short-term, fix and flip, and 30-year rental loans across single and multifamily properties. We also lend on ground-up construction and work with first-time and experienced operators. Our loan products are also available for foreign national investors. InstaLend, your preferred partner for an insta-good experience. For more information, visit instalend.com.
Hello, Ethan. I'm so happy to have you back after 3-4 months. You're back here again in the Unlocking Wealth podcast. So thanks for joining us today, man.
It's always a pleasure, David.
Thanks. Well, we have a lot of things to go over. As our audience knows, Ethan is on the cryptocurrency space, and he's very knowledgeable about this digital asset. And there's a lot of things going on. I mean, we've seen crazy things since last time we spoke. A war is going on in the world. I mean, there's so many things going on, and we've seen a lot of volatility on the cryptocurrency lately. So I know you just came from a conference, and a tech conference, the Emerge. So I'm sure it was a lot of new things spoke about crypto and what's going on. So let's dive in. Give us kind of a rundown of what's going on, what we can expect, and.
All right. Well, just right off the bat, I mean, the fundamental changes are massive. A lot of the market in general, not excluding crypto, but crypto is just kind of factored into it. Overall, the market is volatile. One of the best indicators for how general investor sentiment is going is the volatility of the S&P 500, and that's really high right now. And as you can see from all of the rates being raised, we're expecting larger inflation, which means the harder the asset, the more the investor should be in it. But speaking just generally to crypto specifically, it's got a whole lot to do about nothing for the big boys. Ethereum, Bitcoin, some of the larger caps have been volatile, but still within kind of a generally expected range. We did fall down to 34,000 of Bitcoin, I believe, in January, at the end of January. So that was doozy, but we quickly rose back up and almost we broke 50 for a couple days, and now we're back down to 41 as of today. So the key takeaways is the changes in the technology and things like Solana. I remember on our first podcast we were talking a little bit about Solana. Yes. And how they're gaining traction because of smart contracts, which is kind of Ethereum space. But now we're kind of getting farther along in the game. We're really discovering who the true winners might be. I believe personally, Bitcoin is still your safest bet as far as wealth management goes. If you're a developer, there are far better options. Not to say Bitcoin can't be developed, but it wasn't designed to be. It was more designed to have a storage and be a placeholder for the ideals that crypto looks for. Okay. So at the Emerge conference, there was a lot of hype around Solana, and it was sponsored by Algorand. The conference had a large sponsorship from Algorand, so I heard a lot about that. Algorand's price action has been pretty good over the last 2 years. I think it's 3x since December of 2020, so
Okay.
it's pretty good.
Now, Solana is a direct competitor of Ethereum, right? In a
Yes.
sense, right? Okay.
So it's just a smart contract building platform, essentially. It doesn't do trading all that well, but that's not to say it doesn't have value
Okay.
because, I mean, things like gold don't trade at all physically, pretty much, but they still hold value. So Solana is able to build value through its use cases rather than from its trading platform. Now, the NFT universe has been expanding kind of slower than it was in the beginning of last year, but it's still an emerging market. One of the larger things at the Bitcoin conference, which was in the beginning of this month, before the Emerge conference, was all the people who are NFT startups. I met plenty of people who don't trade crypto at all, but only trade NFTs, which back when NFTs first came out, I was just as skeptical as a lot of people, but I kind of think of it like this now. I don't like every movie, I don't like every song, but there are some songs that I like a lot. And I could see that kind of translating into the creative space that is NFTs. Not to say creative spaces in the art world were the only forms that were happening there. There was definitely some use cases for medical purposes. There was one company that was pitching NFTs as data for your heart rate and like how your heart was functioning, and they offered a device that would electronic stethoscope, so you could have your own personal information as an NFT, and they would partner with hospitals and not trade your data, but rather secure it for the hospital's use. So the crypto world is expanding
Interesting.
fundamentally more than price wise. Obviously, the volatility is what everybody loves to look at, and that's how you make money essentially in the crypto world because it is volatile by nature. But bigger and better things are being built than just dollar signs.
Interesting. Interesting. Now, how is inflation? I mean, the high inflation that we've seen all across the board in the U.S. I know exactly how it's been affecting, real estate. How is that affecting cryptocurrency in general? Um,
It it kind of just makes people put their money where their mouth is. The people who truly believe in it as a store of value are holding it and will never sell it. And the people who are just speculators are getting out. Now, this creates a kind of dichotomy where the people who own some own a lot, and the people who are just trying to trade it own very little. Um, there is plenty of money to be made doing both, but the people who hold all of them are starting to kind of set the markets themselves and being an indirect market maker, kind of a brokerage in that sense, where they can set their own price and you either have to say yes or no and have no other choice. So trading within this 35 to 50 range is kind of what bulls want because they do believe that it will go to 100,000 within the next year and a half. And if they can get it at half the price, a guaranteed 2x for all of your Bitcoin holdings is a really good thing. So they're loading the bag, right? That which is what you want to do, especially before inflationary events. But I will put a word of caution for those of us that were paying attention to 2008's recession. You will notice that everything crashed, even if it had value, which is, kind of perplexing. That's just because whenever there's financial calamity, there's always panic. And the people who aren't holding the bag will swoop in and buy everything that they possibly can at the lowest price, and then inflation will be realized. And in a span of 5 years, they will have reset multiple portfolios, tripled their own, had new businesses, new assignments for every one of their employees. I mean, evolution is inevitable, especially within financial markets. And the people who realize it's all a cycle are going to be the ones that come out on top.
Yep, yep. Now, if that, obviously we prediction is a difficult game, right? It's very hard to predict what could happen, and it could be completely different of what we actually think it will happen. Now, if there is some kind of a recession, which is usually, there's cycles like you mentioned, we might see a recession. I don't know, maybe in 2 or 3 years, 1 year, we don't know. What are the experts saying or forecasting or predicting specifically on cryptocurrency?
Well, when it comes to cryptocurrency, everybody's an expert. So you gotta kind of draw a line in the sand. And where I draw it is from professional speculators, right? Places like JP Morgan, Fidelity, places that if all of their investments were to go to zero, they'd be fine. What are they predicting? Um, they are saying inflation is going to cause a recession, and they're not pointing towards crypto, which kind of hints at maybe crypto is a good idea because in the market, there's always a winner and a loser. Every time you think it's a good time to buy, somebody thought it was a good time to sell, so on and so forth. So the misleading part of it is right a week after JP Morgan says don't buy crypto, they're probably going to go out and buy $250 million worth. So if you do your own research, especially by listening to podcasts like this, you're going to have an opportunity to make your own decision that's informed rather than emotional. And that's
Exactly.
the most important part about building wealth isn't getting it right every single time. It's knowing that you believe in your strategy and are going to stick with it even if it fails. That doesn't mean go all in and, have no regrets. But what it means is develop your strategy through experience rather than just through blind optimism or defeatism.
Correct, correct, and speculation, which I'm seeing right now a lot, also in the real estate space. The smart investor invests on real estate if the numbers make sense. Period. If it's cash flowing, number one, that's rule number one. In appreciation is a bonus, right? I mean, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, then you're still cash flowing on the asset. That's what I like about real estate in terms of, the speculation. Now, there's a lot of investors coming into the market where they're speculating with the possible appreciation of that real estate piece, because obviously that's what we're seeing right now in the market, right? I think I was reading an article that in certain markets we've seen a 22% increase in real estate single family homes over a year ago, which is ridiculous. It's crazy, right? But there's other issues there, right? I mean, we have a supply and demand issue. I mean, there's other issues there in the real estate arena. But at the end of the day, I think everything gets related, right? I mean, there's a lot of money out there right now. And there's a lot more disposable income because obviously there was so much money printed. That is also obviously the cause of inflation, supply chain issues, and all of that. Now, a lot of people I notice, and you can tell me if this is accurate or not. We probably, and I don't have the number or the statistic, but what do you think is the increase of investors or on buying cryptocurrency? I mean, the market that has increased over the year, I'm assuming it has to be very high, in double digits at least.
I'd say since crypto doesn't have as rigid KYC, I mean, you can get it without any KYC. If you go to major exchanges, you're gonna get KYC. So nobody knows for sure the actual number because there is no way to tell, and that's how it was designed. But I like to base it off of how the boom in developing of cryptocurrency has gone, right? Because that obviously shows extreme interest if you're willing to make your own crypto or help develop a currently existing one. And I would say that's probably gone up 6 to 7 times
Wow.
since the low of 2020, which was March, around $4,000 for Bitcoin. I'd say the number of people working in crypto has probably gone up 6 or 7 times since that.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, uh, now, what do you think about? Talk to me a little bit about regulation. I remember we spoke last time a little bit about regulation. It has happened a lot since last time we spoke. So I read there's some states in the U.S. that are kind of embracing crypto a lot more than others. What about internationally? What's going on that on the politics part of it, on the regulation part?
Ah, well, there's big news coming out of Australia, actually. So, Australia will have their first Bitcoin ETF next week. But from what I know in trading crypto in Australia, there's a lot of it's basically a stock. It's treated almost as a security. It's
Okay.
very regulated, and that's why they'll let an ETF happen. Now, internationally, beyond, let's say, westernized countries, places like Russia, China, they're not too concerned with crypto at the moment because and in an instant, since they have such overwhelming political control, they could just snap their fingers and make the KYC and everything happen instantly. So what they're kind of doing is let us play around with it a little bit, kind of like the US did with El Salvador for a little bit, just trying to, use it kind of as the canary in the coal mine kind of a thing and see what to do after that. But other than that, in the EU, there's been a large bill passed that was specifically targeted at health and COVID-19. But, as governments love to do, they just slip little things in there. And there was some crypto mandates for the UK that involved pretty much giving up security coins, which is a kind of a subgenre within crypto, which their whole point is you can't KYC them even if you tried, right? The technology literally prevents you from doing it. So things like Monero are just getting swooped off the streets. People are holding onto their Monero as tightly as they can as the last line of payment in a sovereign individual's life.
Okay.
And within that sphere, we're just going to see crypto turn into stocks, is my prediction. And there's
That's
plenty of
in,
money to be made in stocks, but it's kind of defeating the purpose.
so. Do you think that's going to be inevitable to some point that it will become kind of like a stock?
Yeah, without repeating too much of what we said in the last podcast, essentially governments want control. That's why they're a governance. So not being able to control a vast amount of money is, alarm bells signaling everywhere. So
Correct. Okay. All right. I read yesterday, actually, I think I read an article about Utah is passing, I believe, three bills embracing crypto in some manner. Do you know? Did you read or hear about that?
I haven't, but that does not surprise me in the slightest. If there's anything I've learned from our connections in Utah, it's that they are willing to speculate because their distrust of the federal government,
Yeah.
which I think is warranted at this point. A lot of things are happening outside of the realm of it being clear to the average citizen. So when more things are hidden, both sides just it's kind of a domino effect. The just keeps
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see more. I mean, I think there's more states are probably going to follow, those type of bills. any direct indirect effect that the crisis in Ukraine, Russia has had on cryptocurrency, maybe volatility? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, without getting too political, I think it would be Russia's correct move uh, to ban the use of cryptocurrencies in Russia, not because I think that's what would be best for the individual, but given the fact that Russia seems to operate entirely through the Kremlin and they are not afraid to flex their control, at this point, I don't see why they wouldn't. Um, it is a great benefit to Ukraine that Bitcoin is so interoperable within countries, and being able to send it in Ukraine's time of need is very important as well. But um, war is never certain. I mean, if you think of every country in an economical sense, when they operate as a business, they're essentially a startup, right? Ukraine as a startup, if I were looking at it in a venture capital mind, I probably would not invest in Ukraine, objectively. However, if I were looking at the same thing for Russia, I probably would invest in Russia, given how they've backed the ruble to gold now, and they've recovered all of the value they've lost in the forex market since the beginning of the war. And China seems to be with them on leaving the SWIFT system, and not just China, but also India and Brazil. So it shows that there is kind of a split between the international monetary policies and powerful sovereign nations. And we're going to see that continue to develop. And Bitcoin, when it serves for the individual, is being away from all of those things. So I think it's good to own Bitcoin, not because you're eventually going to trade it back for fiat, but because the amount of uncertainty in the global macro economy is tremendous.
Interesting perspective, Ethan. Um, I read an article about the U.S. Secret Service cracking down on a crypto fraud for about a total of $102 million. How is that happening? Because I was reading the article, and they even say that there's some people doing this without really knowing that they're committing fraud. So, is really fraud? Is really isn't?
Yeah, this is one of the problems with the technological age, is to accomplish something genuinely, you kind of have to become an expert in it, because everything within technology is just so complicated now that if you don't know exactly the literal ones and zeros, you might end up committing fraud. I mean, this is happening to a lot of celebrities who will uh, promote an NFT, and then whoever paid them to promote an NFT ends up just swiping a bunch of money off of the table, and then they're left, being famous and their name attached to uh, said rug pull. Then what do? They can't just say, "Well, I don't know." I mean, when you break a law, not knowing isn't really a defense.
Correct.
So people are really just going to have to pay attention to what they promote and why.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, I found it kind of interesting because it says that they cracked down about $102 million, but they didn't really explain what was illicit. They mentioned that it's been fraud on the trading, but I don't understand. It didn't really explain how the fraud happened, so they didn't go into details.
So it can happen in a number of ways. The most common with NFTs is they'll create, say, 2,000 prints of whatever NFT, and they'll say, this is the only 2,000 prints we'll ever make, and they sell them for a lot of money, and then everybody wants one and the price goes up, and then they secretly make 2,000 more. And then everybody who paid an exorbitant price for the original 2,000 as an instant, halving of the value in their NFT. So that type of thing will happen a lot
Okay.
with NFTs. But as far as actual cryptos go, they'll just send people falsified keys, or they'll say there's only 100,000 of these coins, but really they made 20 million of them, and they own 19,999,000 of them, and then sell them all that way.
And they drive
So
the price up.
exactly.
Okay.
And it's with the encryption around crypto, it's easy for somebody to do that if the investors aren't savvy.
And that's it. That leads to my next question. If one of our listeners or in an audience, they obviously they listen to the podcast to get more information, get more knowledge on the cryptocurrency space, what things they should look at and be a red flag if they are trying to invest, and what do they have to look for just to avoid these type of frauds?
Um, I would say two initial researches you can do is who is the creator. If it's some nameless, faceless guy or just a Twitter username, I wouldn't do it. But if it's somebody that's known within the crypto developing sphere, has worked on previous projects, it's probably more likely to be legitimate. Number two would be read the documents. If they don't have documents on what they created and why, then it's a bad sign. There's a white paper for every good crypto, and there are white papers for bad ones too, but usually you can tell when you read it who
Okay.
wrote it.
Perfect. Now, what are the give us an update. I remember on our last episode, we discussed a little bit about you guys launching your fund for crypto. So how is that coming along? Give us a little bit of an update on your fund.
Yeah, so our fund is just got our first few investors here. We're still doing our raising round. Um, we're shooting for 25 million. We're trying not to get uh, over that. 25 million would be the ideal number, but obviously we are not the only startup doing funds, so we don't expect the world. Um, but we've also been dabbling a little bit further into venture capital, just because there's a high demand for startups have a high demand for venture capital right now, and venture capital is being a little bit more speculative. That could speak a little bit towards there being a bubble in fintech, which there definitely is, in my opinion. But there's a bubble in pretty much everything, and that's uh, no fault of fintech or crypto specifically, but yeah, it's happening. So our fund is focused on the global macro economy, big picture ideas. I mean, it's one thing to have wealth, it's another thing to have sovereignty. And if you can have both, that's when you really have achieved personal security. And so we're looking to build those things. So when everything within the crypto world as it is now is built mostly off of hype or whatever Elon has tweeted most recently, we are more speculative towards those things than we are towards the proven larger cap kinds of cryptos and the fund or the startups that we believe can fit a good venture capital fund like ours.
Huh, interesting. What are the investors that you're looking to attract? Credit investors? Is there a minimum to invest on the fund?
Yeah, um, we operate fairly standardly. We look for accredited investors. We do 2 and 20 as pretty standard, and we have a minimum of 250,000. So it's fairly standard. We will take your money in crypto if you choose to invest it that way. 1 year lockup. I mean, pretty standard for any hedge fund.
Investment
Um,
fund.
yeah, we're working towards getting as many brokerage licenses as we can, and we do have Series 7 right now.
Okay.
So we can do stocks as well, although we're staying away from launching that part of our fund until we have all of the SEC's boxes ticked.
Of course, that's great. Okay, and then on the venture capital side, you're going to be focusing on high, I mean, technology, fintech startups. That's the idea.
Yes,
Okay.
we're looking to do mostly angel and Series A.
Okay.
A lot of our relationships we've built early on in the company have been with later stage venture capital. So we think we have a good opportunity to find some startups, do their Series A, and then hand it off to some of our friends who want a more secured bet. And we like doing stuff like that because we find it's easier to talk to a person and understand their team by meeting them than it is to just invest in a crypto um, off of pure technical analysis.
Okay. Perfect. Um, if any of our listeners would like to connect with you or find out a little more about the fund, you can always tweet to Ethan. We'll share your Twitter information. That way they can connect with you. Um, Now, one of the most interesting questions of this interview is going to be which cryptocurrencies we should be looking at or watching, paying attention to at the moment.
All right. Well, as I said before, I generally have safer bets in the crypto world in mind, as specifically now. Um, I would say Binance Coin is a good bet. Binance Coin kind of operates almost as a stock for Binance itself, and Binance is growing exponentially across the world, and they're doing it securely. Coinbase is in many numbers of lawsuits for pretty much everything you can think of that they could have commit, they probably did. Whereas Binance is realizing the differences in laws, and it has a separate, part of Binance that operates just in the US and a separate part of Binance that operates just in Europe. And that kind of forward thinking is what will lead Binance to be the premier trading site, I do believe,
Okay.
for those who are speculators.
What about I mean, Ethereum, XRP? I was reading about Avalanche the other day. What are your thoughts on that on those?
So for Ethereum, I think Ethereum has probably within this quarter a possible 25% upside.
Okay.
I would say, as much as I hate to say it, I think Sheeb coin has a good chance of continuing to go up. Um, that the reason behind that is fundamental, which is people who don't know about crypto and are just starting to get into it now, especially with all the marketing that's going into it, are going to buy something their friends have, and their friends have Sheeb. So that's probably what's going to happen. I'd say probably 15 to 20% upside. I mean, all of this could change on the announcement that the Fed is, raised rates by 100 basis points and so on.
Yeah.
So the market right now, I think, is solid assets, and I would recommend Bitcoin just because of how it operates. It is the truest form of cryptocurrency as for what crypto stands for. Not necessarily the largest gainer, but definitely the most bulletproof in terms of it will
Stable.
stand the test of time. Yes.
Stable. Okay. We spoke at the beginning a little bit about Solana. You have some good expectation about Solana as well.
I think Solana is going to fall within the category of, uh, let's say, pushing sideways, a little bit more stagnant. Solana's value is almost 1-to-1 tied with NFTs just because of it offers the same advantages Ethereum does, but with much lower fees and a little bit easier to develop on. But I think Solana's upside, if NFTs didn't lose any traction, would be great. But I have a feeling NFTs are going to lose traction, and Solana will Solana's price will suffer because of
We'll
that.
suffer because of that.
But I think they'll probably even out. You could probably see 5 to 8% on a week, up or down, give or
Okay.
take, for probably a while.
Okay. Now, NFTs. I mean, any particular? I mean,
I would just buy one. Um, buy something cheap, buy something you like. The first step to understanding something is wanting to understand it. And the longer you say it's worthless, it'll never be any good, then the longer you'll stay uninvested. And I mean, just because of direct inflation, everything will increase. I mean, you could go out and buy pickled eggs and sell them for 35% uptick in like a year, depending on inflation. We'll see.
now,
So
what to look at NFT? I mean, just look for one that you like, but what would be a couple things to look at before you actually buy one and see, and kind of see what happens.
well, then there's two kind of arguments there. Number one would be, what blockchain is it on? Is it on Ethereum? Is it on Stacks, which is smart contracts for Bitcoin, or is it on Solana, and so on and so forth? I would say I would go with Ethereum just because it is tried and true, and Solana is a little bit more hectic. That's where you'll find a little bit more of the rug pulls happening.
Okay.
Ethereum, and then I would choose something you like, because that's why people buy it. If you have, say you like music, buy an audio NFT from one of your favorite creators. OKCoin.com, they have all sorts of NFTs, and they have a lot of brand ambassadors for songs, and they'll be doing limited releases that way. If you really like art, find a digital artist you like and buy one of their pieces. I mean, it's more of a commodity than an asset per se, but commodities are great investments too.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. And I'm sure there's, I mean, I want there's millions of NFTs available right now. Very, very interesting. So we'll, I think a couple red flags for someone to pay attention on NFTs that they shouldn't be buying. I understand blockchain, I think, is very important, and Ethereum, maybe Solana. Any red flag that, to avoid those kind of frauds like we talked earlier?
Some of the red flags would be, again, creator is number one. You got to know who you're getting it from. But another red flag is the marketing around it. If they came out of nowhere, if like Melania Trump, when she released her NFTs, it was like nobody even like knew if she cared about crypto or not. And then all of a sudden she has a line of NFTs. To me, that would be a little bit suspicious that she's promoting that. So if the marketing seems kind of forced, if it looks like somebody was doing this for money rather than for art, if somebody wasn't going to be doing it anyway, then it's probably a bad thing.
Okay, understand. Perfect. Okay, so it has, if it is related to art, we gotta look at the creator that is a true artist, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's really what is gonna give us a little more credibility on the NFT.
Mm-hmm. Originality is the key.
Okay.
Like when the Bored Apes came out, nobody had even thought about it before, and partly that's why people thought it was kind of useless, was because they'd never thought of it before. But I mean, clearly it has a use case.
Interesting. All right. Well, thank you, Ethan. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for all the updates, the advice, the enlightenment on the crypto world, currency, digital assets, and we'll definitely love to have you again in the show, maybe 3-4 months from now, so we can touch base on what's going on at that moment. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing your knowledge with us.
Absolutely, David. Anytime.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.